The LSU Tigers find themselves 2 wins away from Omaha. Standing in their way, the West Virginia Mountaineers come to Alex Box Stadium this weekend for the Baton Rouge Super Regional, and helping us talk and break down all things LSU baseball yet again, friend of mine, Bryce Koon, who covers LSU for Go 24/7, an affiliate of 24/7 Sports. Bryce, what's going on, man? Appreciate you taking the time. Excited to talk this weekend at Alex Box. It's been a very interesting postseason for not just LSU, but the entire SEC to this point. But Tigers just 2 wins away from getting back to the College World Series.
Yeah, man. And first off, appreciate you having me. And I think when we kind of talked last week, I don't want to say that we assumed, that we'd be talking again this week about it. But I think Tiger fans, if they're watching this, and if they go back to last week's episode, they'll say, stark contrast. And I guess how we approach the weekend, maybe there's not much confidence after nearly a humbling experience, but you're okay being humbled and still moving on, which, hey, a lot of other SEC teams don't get to do.
Yeah, Bryce, I'd say we felt pretty good about it. And the result that we expected is what took place. Maybe not exactly how we thought it would happen, which I want to talk about that really quickly. Because LSU, Bryce, I mean, they cruise. And, let's paint the picture. I mean, it felt like it was almost written in the stars as the weekend progressed that this was the weekend of all the national seeds going down and all the upsets and the mid-majors prevailing. And, you and I talked, and I even mentioned to you, I think, when we talked last week, that it almost kind of scared you a little bit how we spent the whole week just saying, man, this LSU's a lock. They got such a manageable regional. Like, they're going to cruise through this thing. I mean, first 2 games they did. They won by a combined score of 19-0. Cade Anderson, Anthony Ianson were just both fantastic. I mean, they were dazzling. So you're thinking to yourself, no big deal, smooth sailing into Sunday. Then you lose the Little Rock 10-4 in a game that gets away from you. You have 11 walks, and you go into Monday night. Again, we didn't expect it, Bryce. You'd be in that Monday night regional final game, backs against the wall, and then you get down 5-1. And I still had this feeling in my gut that LSU, Bryce, was going to come back, but there were some very uneasy feelings, I'm sure, down there in Baton Rouge and at Alex Box. The legend of Kason Evans is born. What he did in relief, obviously, was incredible. Ethan Fry continues to see a beach ball, stays red hot, had the big knock in the game on Monday to really get the offense going and kind of breathe a sigh of relief, if you will, into everyone. Luis Hernandez, the 2 homers, and, of course, Bear Jones, the Bear, finally comes out of hibernation and puts the exclamation point on that game, and they get the big win on Monday night, 10-6. Thoughts on the weekend? I mean, they accomplished their mission, if you will, advanced to the Super Regional round. And like I said, it was pretty smooth sailing up until Sunday, and things got a little bit interesting.
Yeah, I'm glad you talked about the first 2 games, right? Because we entered into Sunday and really kind of sat there and said, man, you couldn't have asked for a better start to this regional. I mean, it really looked like LSU was going to go with a clean sweep. Wasn't really going to tax a lot of arms. You weren't going to have to worry about some runs, but little old Little Rock, man, put up 40 runs in 3 games while all facing elimination, which is just crazy as they woke up. And, I think one of the biggest things, and, we had our Go 24/7 podcast this morning. We had on Jared Mitchell kind of talking about some of these things. And he mentioned, when you're in the trenches, right? Like, you and I talk about this maybe from a different vantage point. When you're in the trenches in those games, you don't care how pretty it looks at times. You don't care how necessarily, I guess I'll say this, the sex appeal of the win looks like. You just want to win and move on. And so, is Saturday or Sunday turned into Monday, obviously, for these guys, I don't think anybody cared what it looked like. I mean, you just truthfully, and fans talked about this on our message board and all over social media, you wanted to avoid embarrassment nationally. And look, a lot of SEC teams lost, but this really, and kind of the talking and the rumblings around the press box, Chris, was this, if they lose this game, this is going to go down as one of the biggest upsets in program history in terms of the RPI and all the rankings coming in, and then where LSU and the expectations of where this program is. So, no, man, it was testy when they went up 5-1. I will tell you this. Our local radio show host in town, Hunt Palmer, he does some radio work for LSU baseball, and this guy was on pins and needles. Like, you're not supposed to cheer in the press box, and I get it, but he's like, he works with a radio team and everything like that, very closely affiliated. When Ethan Fry hits that opposite field double to unload the bases, kid in a candy shop. It was like Santa had come down the chimney. I mean, this guy was losing his mind, a massive sigh of relief in the crowd. And, I always take some time too, Chris, to kind of, middle innings or so, walk around the ballpark, like to get a feel just for how things are. And, I did it around that time, and you could just sense like, okay, that's what we needed to see. Case and Evans, like you mentioned, started to kind of just, I mean, Chris, he struck out 9 in a row. I mean, it was just masterful, like became a legend down here in Baton Rouge. So, they survive and advance, and that's what you want to do at this juncture of the season. No one's going to care if you're the team lifting the trophy, what happened in the regional. They're all going to remember you kind of by what you do in Omaha, and that's obviously LSU's goal as they got to kind of get through West Virginia this weekend.
You mentioned Bryce, and I would agree with you. This is a game that's going to humble you, and in sports, you get humbled in general. But you'll hear coaches say it's always a luxury when you can learn learn lessons in victory and not have to learn them in defeat. You're forced to learn them in defeat, but when you can still be victorious, but have things to build off of or correct or make adjustments, what have you, and you still win. That is a luxury. Do you feel like LSU learned anything specifically, or did anything? I mean, I feel like for me, and you can speak on this, the one thing I learned is if they get to another game 3, I think it's probably going to be Case and Evans that's getting the start. I know there was a lot of chatter about who LSU should have turned to, and they went to Newt and they went to Cowan. Those things didn't exactly work out. So, I wonder what the strategy with Jay will be. But have they talked about that? And just, outside of just simply the advancing, is there anything you think they're going to take away from that weekend? And because you're still learning about your ball club even at this time of the year.
Yeah, and you're learning about guys that have never been in certain spots too, right? I mean, like LSU's in a luxurious situation of where no matter what happens, and honestly, it might set up better for a super regional because you're playing a maximum of 3 games. There's no doubt who you're throwing on Friday and Saturday, or I should say Saturday and Sunday if you're LSU and going Anderson and Ianson. But to your point about that game 3 starter, yeah, I think you've learned that one. And Jay Johnson has said this all season, like he knew that was within Kaysen, having, look, he's had more conversations in the recruiting sphere with this kid and making sure he got to campus and all those types of things. I mean, you knew that he had maybe that mentality, but until you see it unfold, it's all projection, right? And I think what you saw on Monday night was, to your point, I mean, if you can get 5, 6 innings, and it doesn't have to be 9 strikeouts in a row or 11 punch outs in total or 12, however many he had, but if you can get 5 to 6 quality innings out of them, it changes. I mean, there's a reason that a lot of betting sites have them as the odds-on favorite to win the whole thing, because there's not many teams that can turn the ball over not just once, not just twice, but 3 times to a guy who can go out there and limit you offensively. So, yeah, I think so. And then a couple other things maybe in the bullpen too, like Jaden Newt you mentioned. He's given them some good innings over the last month and a half or so. You're still going to have to count on him. And Zach Cowan's a very interesting kind of story, I think, in all of this, because a lot of fans, and you know how fans are, kind of ready to get over and move on from Zach Cowan. But he still has some good stuff. I think he still can help you out, and he's a big reason why you got here. And so when you kind of look at what those guys provide, some of the other bullpen arms, Maverick Rizzi, Chase Shores, all of those guys are going to have to be pieces for you down the stretch. And what did you learn offensively? I hate to oversimplify it. You and I were talking about our Braves here, sadly, before we started the show. And, it comes down to execution. And these guys on Monday, the switch just flipped. And look, you played baseball, like whether it's a pitching change that you're like, thank God that guy's out of the game, whether it's just a big defensive play or Case and Evans striking out the side, kind of get you back into the dugout. This group has the ability to hit with the best of them. And for some reason, they just go quiet and they can't find it. And, they hit some balls pretty hard on Monday, but just could not find. I don't know if you saw, Chris, the center fielder for Little Rock was making highlight reel play after highlight reel play. Those are that tears down the psyche a little bit when you've squared one up and you can't get good results. So it's why this sport's humbling. I don't know if you've really learned much about the offense other than the fact that, you're pretty lucky to be in a spot where, Luis Hernandez and a guy like Chris Stanfield have kind of sat at the back of your order for so long. They moved Stanfield up out of the 9 spot. They moved Luis Hernandez up, where I really think he's a big time middle of the order bat. I said that in the preseason, and he helped you out there. So whatever that combination, I was talking with some folks today, I think we could see a similar lineup change if they went out on Monday of kind of rolling that into the weekend, because if it's not broke, don't fix it, and you want to kind of keep all the juju you got rolling into this weekend.
And let's move into this weekend, Bryce, because LSU is where we expect them to be. That is the Super Regional round. The opponent, maybe not who we expected. West
Yeah.
Virginia coming out of the Clemson Regional. The Mountaineers were really, really impressive. It was actually Kentucky, funny enough, that ended Clemson's season, beating them in their own regional. And, of course, West Virginia comes out of that one. Blue collar, really scrappy club. They're going to be a tough out. I'm sure you were keeping an eye on that regional because you knew that LSU was facing the winner of who came out of there. Impressions on West Virginia from what you've seen and challenges they might pose for the Tigers?
I think one of the biggest things when you dive in and look, you can look at analytics, you can love numbers. I think that definitely has a place in the game that we talk about. But one thing I don't think you can necessarily quantify is what's going on inside that clubhouse. And for West Virginia, you look at that roster. Funny enough, you mentioned it. If LSU knocks off North Carolina last year, West Virginia was going to head down to Baton Rouge for a regional. So that was going to be the super regional opponent last year. So when you look at what the Mountaineers bring, it's a veteran group that's played a lot of baseball together. You don't see that a lot in the day and age of transfer portal, but they've got a core group of guys that have been playing together for a long time, taking those bus rides, taking those plane rides to where you got to go in the Big 12 conference and understand their game very well. It's a scrappy bunch too. You kind of go back and I was looking at some of their regular season games. They can call back. They can, a lot of people like to talk about LSU being able to come back and win games. West Virginia's done that a good job too. So it's not a team that's going to go down lightly, and no team's going to go down lightly at this juncture of the season. It's a pitching staff that's top 25 in ERA, top 30 in WHIP. They can get you out. I mean, they can, not a ton of swing and miss, but they know how to force weak contact. And I think you talked about one of the challenges being posed to LSU. That's kind of the worry, right? Like if you don't square them up, they'll take a ground out to second base, let you roll over on something to short all day long. They'll let you do that. And so it's going to be an interesting matchup because I think West Virginia's kind of a been there, done that. If I'm not mistaken, it's their third straight. They've at least been the regionals 3 straight years now with this group. It's a veteran group. I think all 9 of their top hitters in both average and OPS last year have returned. So it's just a group altogether for the Mountaineers. They kind of been here, done that, and they're not going to necessarily back down from the challenge. And I know we like to talk about it, and you've experienced it, the aura of Alex Box and how it can get to some teams. And, I think going back to last week, Little Rock handled that very well. Like they were playing with house money. They handled it very well. And, West Virginia's, they played in some big time atmospheres. Yes, the Box is going to be rocking this weekend, but this is, like I said, it's a team that very veteran label, kind of laden team. I don't think they're going to get big eyes this weekend, if that makes sense. I think they're going to be able to kind of calm things down. And, doesn't mean that West Virginia is going to win, but I do think it's an opportunity for LSU to face a quality opponent. And LSU is going to have to earn every single out to get all 27 to take those games.
Bryce, 2 things for you. Number one, has Jay Johnson said anything, which I'm assuming he hasn't, about the pitching strategy for the weekend? Will it be Anderson or Ianson in game 1? If not, who do you think it'll be? And then second, I asked you this last week, I'll ask you again. Key or keys of the weekend for LSU, outside of the obvious. Again, we talked about it last week, pitching, hitting, great defense, timely hitting, if you will. But key for LSU if they're going to punch their ticket and win those 2 games and get to Omaha.
Yeah, so your first one was funny last week. Obviously, we talked with Jay, and he said, "Please don't ask me, who's pitching. Don't do that." And I would imagine, if he hasn't said anything publicly, he's going to have his last media availability on Friday, talking about all of these things. But if I had to guess, honestly, and put money on it, I would say it's going to be Cade Anderson. I know they went with Ianson, last Friday because they knew there might be an opportunity. They want to use him again. But with Ianson throwing, obviously the last couple of innings on Monday to clinch it, you probably want to get him as much rest as possible. Now, is Anthony probably going in that, room and saying, "Hey, coach, I can go. Like I'm ready to go Friday, and then or Saturday, and if you need me again on Monday, I'm ready to go." Like it's all hands on deck, and we all get that. But I imagine they're going to throw Cade on Saturday. You obviously get into a Sunday situation where you're going to go Ianson, and then like you mentioned, I mean, it feels like a no-brainer that it's going to be Case and Evans if you do get to that Monday game. That's been kind of the chatter, honestly, over the, just here in the local media is there a situation where Jay goes for the throat? Like, let's just say you win Saturday, you get to Sunday, Ianson gives you 6+, you've got a 2 or 3 run lead, and Jay goes for the throat with throwing Kaysen on Sunday. And, it's the Jekyll and Hyde thing, right? It's, you got to weigh your options, the cost benefit there. And if you lose that game, man, you're not sitting in a good spot for Monday. But if you win it, then it's like, hey, I love the aggressiveness. So, from the pitching perspective, that's kind of it. And then talking about the keys, I mean, obviously, timely hitting has kind of evaded this team, I think, just in a lot recently. But, in terms of actual keys to this, I think two players for me have really, really kind of blossomed a little bit this past weekend. And, Ethan Fry's been on a heater for about a month, but man, if you're going to lose a bat at times like Jared Jones, having Ethan Fry, big time slugger, has great opposite field power, as we saw on Sunday and Monday, having him in the middle of that order, man, I don't want to say it fully replaces Jared Jones because Jared is a very valuable player. But if Jared's down, he's not playing like he needs to be, that's a massive key cog in the middle of your lineup. And then, that combination of Luis Hernandez and Steven Milam, who had a really, really good weekend. So I think those guys have to be catalysts for you just in terms of that. And then from a bullpen perspective, you really, and I've said this multiple times in writing a column for Go 24/7 about this, it's time for some of these guys to grow up. And you need big innings out of guys that we initially haven't seen give you big outings. Because look, we've mentioned some pitchers, we know the big names, but there's going to come a time where if you're up by 4 in the 6th inning and Ianson's done on Sunday, you need a guy to maybe eat an inning or two to get you to maybe a Zach Cowan or get you to a Casey Evans if he allows to do that. So, names obviously like I mentioned earlier, Maverick Rizzi, Chase Shores, those are keys in that. I think to kind of sum that up, you need some inning eaters. That's what you really need this weekend against a team that's going to put the ball in play at a pretty high clip. They're going to make you make plays. And I guess just aside from obviously the factors and the coach speak, having guys that maybe can get you a pivotal 2, 3, maybe even 4 outs, that could make the difference between winning, losing, or maybe making this thing way too close altogether.
Timely hitting for sure, Bryce. There was a lot of opportunities for LSU offense, leaving the bases loaded more than a couple times. We'll have to cash in on those to make a deep run, certainly into Omaha and get through this weekend. Bryce Koon, Go 24/7 of 24/7 Sports, one of the best in the business. Bryce, appreciate you taking the time. Let folks know in case for whatever reason they didn't last week, which shame on them. If they didn't follow your work, let them know where they can find you because I know you'll be there, full coverage of LSU West Virginia this weekend.
Yeah, of course. You can follow me over on Twitter/X, whatever you want to call it, at Bryce_Koon. And we'll have great coverage over at Go 24/7 as well. We just had a podcast episode out with former LSU Tiger Jared Mitchell. He's on the SEC network now, and obviously you know him from your appearances there with Mic'd Up, and he does a great job. And we kind of broke down some of the aspects of the game just through the players' eyes, and I thought that was a really good one. So you can check that out over on the site. And like you mentioned, man, we're going to be there all weekend. So I know LSU fans are hoping for kind of a 2-0 get out of there, but much like yourself, I'm a massive baseball fan, and I like watching good baseball, and I think we'll see that this weekend at LSU.
Bryce, you're the man. Enjoy this weekend, and let's hope we're doing it again next week. I think we will.
Awesome. Let's do it.